I have just had a thought. I was just scrolling through Fiverr and I thought to myself, I wonder if there's any tennis coaches on this website that could help people improve their game. I've never really heard of anyone going to Fiverr for tennis coaching, but it turns out there's quite a few coaches on here. And what I was really shocked about is how cheap you can get advice for. There's people selling advice for £5, which is ridiculous. Because I mean, the price of a tennis lesson can be very expensive and not affordable for most people. So if someone can send a video of themselves to one of these coaches on Fiverr and get some advice, that's quite an affordable thing to do to improve your game. So I'm going to do a little experiment. I'm giving myself £30 to spend on 3 Fiverr tennis coaches. I'll send them a link to watch my most recent tennis match in a tournament, and I'll ask them for advice on how I can improve my game. We're going to find out if this is an affordable method that you could use to improve your own tennis, or are you better off spending lots of money on real life private lessons and scrolling through social media for tips. So let's find some coaches. First up, we have this guy, Hik, High K. I think that's how you say his name. And he just has a picture of a shadow and he says, I will improve your tennis shots from £5. So let's stick with this guy to start with. He says, send me a video of you playing ground strokes. You choose and I will provide feedback. 4-day delivery, £4.13. Perfect. He is going to be my first choice. Right, who else have we got? This guy, Philip, looks pretty good.
And I'm a tennis pro with over 30 years of experience teaching
Lovely scenery.
levels and all ages. Send me some of your video footage of you playing and we'll get
Speaks
together
well.
and review.
He's on the tennis court. I quite like this guy. However, the only problem is it's £29, which is a little bit out of my price range. So we're going to leave him for later. And if I can't find anyone, then I will come back to this guy. But to the left of him, we have someone else. And he says, I will help you improve in tennis, which is exactly what I want to hear. He's got some nice pictures of him playing. What else does he have to offer? You can give me an issue you are having in your game and we'll try and solve it together. Perfect. And this is £12. Okay, I think, oh, he's got more advice down here. He's been playing tennis for 12 years. He's trained a lot of people from 5 to 60, from beginners to advanced. So perfect. He can definitely help me a little bit then. He's a fan of tennis. Perfect. Nice little bio. I think we'll add this guy to the list. Who else have we got? Why is it coming up with singing lessons? I don't want singing lessons. This is tennis coaching. Okay. So there.
Hi, I'm.
Okay. So after having a little look around, my mind just kept going back to Phil. I read a little bit more into his bio and I actually think he looks really good. Also, the fact that he offers a video call I think is really good value for money, and I'd be excited to do that. I know it is a little bit over budget now, but I'm still able to hire 3 coaches on Fiverr for under the price of your average real life tennis lesson. The 3 coaches I'm going for are High K, who I realise is actually called Manos, Iyed, and Phil. So the next thing I need to do is write them a little message. Hi there. I am a tennis player, brackets, and YouTuber. I guess we could call myself a YouTuber. Alright, so I will be back in a few days' time and see how many of these guys respond and see what their advice is. So I will see you in a couple days. Alright, I have received all of the replies from the Fiverr tennis coaches, and I'm just going to say to start with, before I get into it, that my experience with all 3 of them was super good. They were all really responsive and all keen to get involved with the video, and yeah, it was a really good experience. So let's get into the first response, and that was from Iyed. He replied to my initial message super fast and got the PDF with all of his advice overnight. So I messaged him in the evening and I woke up and the PDF was there right as I woke up. And there was a lot of information on here. For only, what was it, like £12-15 for his feedback, he's given me a PDF with a whole page of improvements. Advice section, time-stamped feedback from my match, giving little, I guess, tips here and there on what he thought I should have done better, plus with a little drill to finish. So for the price of it, the value for money, I'd say was incredible here. But let's get into the actual feedback and see what I think. The first thing he says is, from what I saw, your main problem is not really a technical problem. It's in the smaller details that make the difference between an average player and an ATP player. So from this first sentence, I'm pretty happy with what I see here. Like, I agree, I'm a pretty advanced player, so there's not going to be a need for a massive technical change in my game to get me to the next level, and it is in the small details. So starting off right, I think it's good to set the tone that way, and let's see what's next. Okay, he says the first problem is my footwork. Interesting. He says first thing, coming back to middle of the court, you're a bit too slow to get there. So he's just saying a little bit slow with my recovery here and there. He also did mention, actually, I should say, that English is not his first language, so he's done his best. And I am able to understand pretty much everything that he's saying. It's not quite the same terminology that I'd use in certain situations, but I get the gist of what he's saying, so that's not a problem at all. He says, you're too advanced on your line. You don't adapt much to the pace of the game. So what I think he's saying here is that I go down line too often, especially, I think, on my forehand side, rallying forehands cross court, and sometimes I go down line a little bit too much. And then that lets my opponent dictate the pace of the game. If I'm going down the line or where I'm not really attacking and there's not really any intention behind it, I compromise positioning. If they hit a good cross-court ball, I'm under pressure. So I agree with that. I think that's a fair statement. What does he say next? Another thing with the footwork is hitting the ball whilst running. You must learn to stop to the ball. Okay, so I think this is not necessarily wrong. However, I think it's more important for beginners. I'd say I'd use that piece of advice. When I'm coaching, sometimes I see people out of position and running to the ball to get a bit too close, etc. But the more higher up the levels you get in the game, there's going to be instances where you can't help but run to the ball. And that's where you have to learn some more of the extra footwork patterns. For example, I don't know, the wide one where you do like a running crossover whilst you hit it. And that's where I'd advise people to look into the Bailey footwork patterns. I think that is the best way to get a grip for all of the different footwork patterns that you can use, and then he gives you lots of drills. So I'll link that in the description if anyone's interested. Last thing, should stop jumping. I think it's quite situational. I think there are a lot of instances where I do jump a little bit too much, especially on return, sometimes on second serve return, and it's all about body weight transfer. If I'm not transferring my body weight through the ball enough and I'm jumping upwards, then it's not going with the weight where I need it to go. So I think this is an accurate statement, but I'd be interested to see what timestamps he picks out from the match to back it up, because then that will give me a little bit more detail as to whether it's the same situations that I'm thinking of in my own head. Okay, so that's the footwork section, and 4 key bullet points. I think it's very clear, easy to understand, and if someone was to send them footage to Iyed over here, I think it'd be quite clear on what you would need to do to improve. I think he's very good at communicating, even if English is not his first language. Okay, next one. You're too aggressive. It's not bad to be aggressive, but as you probably saw, you can't keep that rhythm much. Okay, I agree to a certain extent. I think it's not necessarily that I'm too aggressive. I think aggressive play is the way that you need to play to move up levels, and especially as I'm not 6'5" and got massive shots, I need my game style to be, in my head, quite aggressive. Otherwise, I'm just going to be super passive. But what I think he's actually trying to say here is that I'm too one-dimensional. I don't have much variety in my game. I don't slice enough, tactically slice enough. I don't change the pace with loopy shots. I was just playing flat, hard, trying to take it early the whole match. So I actually agree with what he's saying here. Yeah, and he goes on to say, my advice for this is that tennis is not hitting the ball strong. Tennis is like a game of chess. You have to adapt the pace, change style. Yeah, so that's exactly what he's saying. So I think he's actually spot on here. During the long rallies, when you're in difficulty, I just play to the opposite of the player, making it hard for me to take advantage. You should tell yourself that when you're back, you should try harder moves. Okay, so I think he's just saying throughout the whole match, when I was under pressure, I just went for the safe option the whole time. Got it back in play, but then I ended up being dictated around a bit. So I think what he's saying is if it continues like that, then I need to go for a little bit more. And that doesn't necessarily mean slapping winners the whole time. I think it means just putting a little bit more pace through it. Just increasing the tempo when I'm under a bit of pressure, just to keep me in that neutral situation and not carrying on being defensive. I was just too safe, high, middle-ish, trying to go cross-court, but then he was able to dictate. So I would agree. Okay, and then there's a few other smaller problems. Okay, I like the way he's done this. So he's done his 3 main points that he thinks that needs the most improvement, and then he's highlighted some other areas that needs to be improved, but that aren't as important as the other areas. So I think the actual structure of this feedback is excellent, to be honest, especially for the price. It's £12, and I've got 4 pages very clearly laid out in bullet points. With some other feedback here, which could be improved on next once I get the main points done. So I think that's very good. Okay, let's go on to the exciting part now, the timestamps. Let's start with this second one here. He says, in this clip you jump, which doesn't add anything, and the ball goes out. So let's see what he picks up on the jumping and see if it's the same thing that I mentioned earlier. Ha, interesting. Yeah, that's it. To be fair, that is exactly what I picked up on earlier. On this return here, where's my body weight going? As I land, I'm here, I'm set. Ideally, I want that body weight going straight into the court, especially on the return. It's going to be a flatter shot. And what happens? I go straight up into the air, body weight transfers upwards, and the ball goes long. So that backs up what he was saying earlier, and I think that's a pretty accurate thing. Let's take another situation here. Okay, 13.28. You're too advanced on the ball, so you hit it behind you, which results in an error. So again, another footwork thing. Let's see.
Really good to see.
Okay. There, I agree. I went too far forwards. I think that's what he means by advanced. I didn't create that semicircle around the ball. Anything where it's sort of inside-outy or inside-in, you've always got to create that semicircle around the ball to give yourself enough space to then go forward to the ball. If you go straight onto it, it comes a little bit close to you, and it causes an error most of the time, like we saw here. So 2 instances there on the footwork I actually fully agree with. Okay, let's take a look at something slightly different that isn't quite footwork related. Okay, this is interesting. You let him set the pace of the rally and kept playing on him, which made you lose the point. Yeah, so I think this is an example of where I'm not doing quite enough in the neutral situation. I'm under pressure. I say I'm just pushing the ball in play and then ended up making the error. So yeah, that is accurate. Tactically, could have done a lot more, especially moving through the court and trying to get my forehand sometimes there. I just didn't do enough with the ball. And then we finish with a little bit of footwork training. It gives me an exercise starting in the middle. This is a classic, this one, I love this one, where you just go, collect the ball. It's good for change of direction and speed in the first few steps. So this is a good exercise, and then gives me a little description of how to do it. So I think overall, rating this Fiverr coach is very good. I was very impressed with Iyed. Speed of response, and we have to remember the amount of money that I paid for this, like literally £12. And to get all this feedback to me within that amount of time, super impressive. Really well structured. I agreed with a large majority of what he said. You're not going to agree with everything that everyone says, especially with all the coaches. But for me to agree with a large majority of it, I'm very happy with that. And there's evidence with the timestamps to back up what he said earlier. So overall, super impressive and a great start to the responses. So thank you to Iyed. Thank you for being part of the video and fully deserved those 5 stars that I gave you. All right, next up we have Manos. And when I asked him to be part of the video and see if he'd be up for doing it, he actually replied and said that he already subscribed and watched some of my videos already. So that was really funny. I didn't expect that from any of these guys. But of course, he was totally up for being in the video. And really cool to see the process of what happened once I bought that order. So what I had to do was fill out this little form, which gave him a little more detail of what I wanted to work on. I explained to him that what I was doing with everyone was just sending him the match and then them giving me feedback. But it was cool to see him want to know a little bit more details about me and where I wanted that improvement. And he got back really fast within a couple days, and he sent me a little file with his advice. And we have to remember that this is the cheapest one. So this is only, I think, £5, which is pretty impressive. So let's have a look at what we got for £5. Since you're getting advice and coaching from more people, it's important you don't overwhelm yourself with information, as this can do more harm than good. Yes, this is very accurate. Obviously, I'm getting advice from lots of people here for the sake of investigating the Fiverr tennis coaches, but a problem with getting too much advice is you get conflicting ideas sometimes, and you don't know what to focus on, you get overwhelmed, you get confused. So I think this is a great way to start. So he says, I should say that I told him I wanted him to focus on my backhand, because that's the shot that I felt most insecure with, I'd say. At the level you would like to play, it's important to have excellent footwork and move around the court quickly, not only to get the ball your opponent hits, but also to have the best position for each shot. Very accurate statement. Yeah, you want to be in defensive positioning, close stance. And this is actually interesting. I've heard from some of the other players that I know, when they've practiced with the top pros, like I'm talking like top 10, the pros have said to the hitting partners that when they're warming up and when they're practicing, they always try to get into that close. And what he means here is the neutral stance, where you're side on and you're moving through the ball, rather than loading in the open stance. And I think this is a common misconception that everyone thinks the semi-open stance, loading and transferring in, is the optimum position. But it depends on the ball that you receive. And when you're being offensive, getting on the front foot, getting that neutral close stance where you can just turn into the ball and drive the hip, is often very, very good because you're stable. So as he says here, it allows that weight transfer forward to the ball, and allows you to get more pop, and on the forehand as well. Yeah, so I agree with that, and I think sometimes I do go a little bit too much in the open stance when I could be stepping in, getting inside the court, cutting that angle up the court, and taking it a little bit earlier. So I agree. I think that is something I need to work on. Okay, he says that power comes from the rotation of the trunk. What does that mean? I'm sure you have seen the incredible Federer forehand and have noticed that his arm is straight while moving towards the incoming ball. It's not conscious at all. The arm movement is a result of his trunk rotating and the arm to follow his rest body. Okay, so what he's saying here is that you need that chain reaction and that rotational power from loading, driving the hip, and then everything happens as a result. If that's not in sync, let me just stand up here. So if I'm here and I'm just like that with that arm, or just trying to arm it too much and don't get that rotational power driving from the hip and let everything, almost that lag action come, then you're not going to get the power. And that is accurate. I think when I get tight in matches, I don't use that natural, easy power enough. So I agree with that. I think that's a good point. With regard to the straightness of the arm, that's debatable. A lot of coaches have different theories on this, but it depends on grip and everything as well. So sometimes people can have more of a bent arm on the contacts, and people can have a straighter arm. And it's situational depending on the technique and grip of the player. That's not the point he's making here. The point is driving from the hip and getting that rotational power, which I think is very accurate and good information. He says once you have become accustomed to this, you'll be hitting with more power, spin, accuracy due to the movement using larger muscles rather than just the arms. Exactly. The next point that I asked him to focus on was serve. He says, overall my serve technique is good. There are probably some details that are hard to look at in the videos. Yeah, that's fair. I only gave him the match play and it had the top angle. He said one thing that he can point out is my toss. It's not consistent on my first serves. That's why many of them end up a few centimetres behind the service line. I actually really like this. Some people may think that it's quite a basic thing to focus on, but after studying a lot of the Kovac stuff, you've got to start from the beginning of the serve and work your way through. And what happens first? Obviously the grip and the starting position, but the second thing is that ball toss. If that ball toss isn't right, what's the point on focusing on anything later on in the serve if you can't have a consistent contact point? Because what happens from the ball toss and leading up to it is going to change all the different positions. So it's so key, and I think that is completely accurate. If I can get a much more consistent ball toss, especially on my first serve percentage is going to go up. I'm going to have a more consistent serve. My technique's going to be better, and overall that's going to help me win more points. So for him to be really clear with get your ball toss better, get it more consistent on the first serve, it will transform my game. And I think the fact that he hasn't gone into 10, 20 different points to focus on the serve here is actually a really good thing, and it lets me focus on what I actually need to do to improve. As he said at the start, you get too much advice, you get overwhelmed sometimes. So I think that's pretty accurate. I think that's good. And for £5, I think this is a pretty good summary of what I need to improve. Okay, he says, overall you have an aggressive style of play, which is very unforgiving on a bad day. Okay, you should play percentage tennis and choose your shots, especially serves that will allow you to stay in the point longer, forcing your opponent to go for big shots and at the end resulting in mostly errors. Okay, so I didn't give him the whole summary that I was a really passive player and now I'm trying to play more aggressive. But I do think that in that shift that I have done, especially in this match, I was like, aggressive, take everything on, try and dictate every single point. And as he says, it is unforgiving. If you miss a few shots, what's plan B? What are you going to do? Keep doing the same thing and then you lose more. So I think it's important for me personally to keep that aggressive game style because that's what's going to help me develop. However, as he says, I do need to have percentage play and plan B sometimes. And like what Iyed said in the previous point, I need more variety. I need to change up, change the pace of the game. And that is essentially what Manos is saying here. I need to make my game more percentage. And he's not saying don't lose that aggressive play style. He's saying keep it, but just play more percentage. And I like that. I think that's accurate. And I think the advice here for £5 is extremely good value for money. Again, okay, what does he finish with? You need to understand that at this level, players are not mature and really important to take advantage of this. Okay, so what he's saying by this is that most of the time they'll break down mentally. So if you can play aggressive with high percentage, you're going to force your opponent into a lot of areas and then they'll break down mentally. Good information. I actually really like the compactness of this response, and that's what you'd expect for £5. You know, the last one paid a little bit more money, got a big PDF. This time it was a little bit more concise, but very clear again. And I think that's good. So overall, very happy with Manos's response. Value for money, excellent. Responsiveness, excellent as well. And he was open to answering any questions I had on this as well. So really good. Again, fully deserves the 5 stars that I gave him. Okay, and the final response was from Phil. Now, as I said earlier, Phil was a little bit different at the top of the price range. So for that money, I got a Zoom call. So we're going to dive into the day of the Zoom call. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I might upload a separate video where I show our whole conversation because there was lots of cool stuff in there. But I'm just going to give highlights of the key points from our Zoom call, and I will be back afterwards to give a few of my thoughts. All right, I am about to jump on the call with Phil, but I'll just give a little bit of an overview of how these last couple of days were, and actually last week, because we've been in pretty constant communication. He's asked me quite a few questions about my game, kind of like what my technical developments look like, how I would beat myself, what I feel like I'm missing to get to the next level. And I tried to be as transparent as possible, give him pretty solid answers. And he also asked for the full match with the time between the points so that he could really see what I was doing between those points and get a really full picture for the flow of the match. So I'm going to jump on this call and I'm pretty excited. I think he's just sent through that link now. So let's get into it.
Cam,
Hey, can you hear me?
good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly well. And how did you get into tennis? Was it your first sport, your first and last sport, or?
So I played a bit of football when I was younger, but football and tennis. And then when I was like 8 years old, that's when I decided to like really focus on tennis fully. So yeah, that's how I got into it. It was both those sports, and then I just decided at 8 years old, right, I'm going to really go for tennis. And then I tried to play more tournaments, and then got up the junior system really.
And how old are you now?
I'm 25 now.
Well,
So
listen, I mean, I've watched a few of your videos and I am so impressed with the quality of the editing. I don't know if you're doing that by yourself, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
amazing.
Oh
It's
no,
really amazing. It is so professional, and you also have a very, very professional but fun way
mhm.
of presenting yourself in front of a camera. I mean, you're a natural in that respect. So
uh,
it's not
don't know
just
about that.
filming your matches and blah blah blah, and and that's that, but your narration in the background and the variety of videos that you're putting out there is really top quality. I don't know how you got those skills, but
I
impressive.
really appreciate that. I've always been interested in like technology and ICT since a young age. I actually did my ICT GCSE like 3 years early when I was younger. I did quite a lot of computer sort of courses. So I had that kind of like skills in the background, never really used it. And I've always been watching YouTubers in different niches as well. And so when I decided to do it myself, I just watched a ton of YouTube tutorials on different editing softwares and then just taught myself how to do it from there. So yeah,
Wow, wow,
it
very,
does take
very
time though.
impressive.
It's
So
the type of thing
I
where you think you'd speed up over time, but then once you learn more, you want to try to learn new things. So it's not like it takes forever and then you can do it really quickly. It's like it takes forever and then you try and make it better, so it keeps on taking forever.
Do you feel that the knowledge that you have accumulated
hmm
in your journey as a tennis coach,
hmm
through your teaching courses, through hanging around with other tennis coaches,
hmm
to what extent has it helped your own game and to what extent has it hindered you?
I would say that is massively helped me and probably like game changing for my own tennis. Um, Most of the developments I made on my serve have just been through my own research on the serve, through the coaching courses that I've done. And it's just given me a whole new outlook and confidence to know that what I'm doing is working and to understand a system to set up myself. So to have the knowledge myself and sort of essentially coach myself a little bit in the system that I've set up with my training, and the knowledge of how to improve in certain areas is really useful. But then on the other hand, it does make you overanalyze sometimes, and then
I
sometimes
was
you
going to ask. That's the reason I ask. I've come
yeah,
across a lot of pros who part-time teach and who've done the same as you, have gone through teaching courses, etc., etc. And the danger is that they do overcomplicate things and they
yeah,
do overanalyze and they do become overly conscious of too many things rather than just letting it flow on the tennis court. So yeah,
yeah.
that's a reason I was interested.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a big thing for me. And then it also makes me question which way is the right way for me to improve. Like when I'm coaching like a younger player myself, it's quite clear in my mind. Like I can see them play, and I think, right, we need to do this first. This is the most important thing. But then when I look at myself, I like it kind of like goes a bit blurry, and like for some reason I can help others, but then I can't really help myself, and like coaching myself is quite difficult in that sense. Yeah.
You might think you're doing the right thing,
Hmm.
but you always need a third eye and a fourth eye to confirm
For
or
sure.
to actually give you a reality check. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of cool that you're open to doing this session,
For sure.
because some of the stuff I'm going to tell you, you might agree with, some of the stuff you might disagree with. But I think the fact that you're open to hearing different feedback gives you a
Yeah.
huge advantage over those who are framed within their limitations of what they believe and what they don't believe.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what we'll do is what I suggest is that we go over, first of all, a review of your tennis match. I'll point out a few things that I notice good and things that I think you can improve,
Yeah.
and then go over sort of some of the big picture stuff, some of the more longer term things, which I think will take your game to the next level.
Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds perfect. Yeah, really, really good.
Is
I'm
the
excited.
is there anything specific that you wanted to address in the session that we have?
No, not particularly. I'm pretty open to hearing what you have to give me on the feedback. It's quite cool doing this.
Yeah,
Someone like
you're
you,
right.
completely fresh eyes, and see what you think. I'm really interested.
It's true. You're absolutely right. I mean, to a certain extent, I have an advantage and a disadvantage over those who know you well. I mean, I'm basing things on just that one match that you sent me, plus another few of the videos that I had a look at on
Yeah.
on your thingy, and yeah, it might be spot on, or it might be a little bit, yeah, maybe this match wasn't typical of the way I play usually,
Hmm.
etc. So
Yeah. Yeah.
anyway, all right, let's get going. Match review. A few of the things that I thought you did in that match extremely well. I love the fact that you're coming into the net on a regular basis. I suspect, not sure, but based on this match, I suspect it's because against this opponent or on that day, you struggle to put the ball away from the baseline or finish off the ball from the baseline. So you tend to rely to come in to the net, put the pressure and finish off the point. So I think that from that perspective, it's great. You notice from your opponent, he was hardly coming in. He's just predictable, staying back at the baseline. And
Yeah.
when he did come in, the volleys were definitely not solid.
Yeah.
Definitely not the thing he likes to do. Whereas it's plainly obvious you like being at the front. You've got solid volleys. You really enjoy being at the net, and you structured your game plan around coming into the net. So that definitely worked.
Right.
The other thing that I thought was really good is that you also recognize sort of the less obvious times to come into the net. So typically what we teach in tennis is you only come into the net if your feet are inside the baseline, bam, you've got an easy approach shot, get into the net, bam. Whereas on several occasions, you hit a really decent shot with your feet behind the baseline. You identified that the opponent was in trouble. He was on the defensive. He was going to scoop the ball up. You're already running into the net. Bam, nice volley, put away. Fantastic. Really good. So the brain is working well. You've got some IQ there to help you take advantage of your net game and not only come in on the classic approach shots. Okay.
Yeah.
I love the simplicity of your backhand from a tactical and from a technical perspective. From
Mhm.
a tactical perspective, you keep it cross court. You seldom
Yeah.
go down the line. You
Yeah.
really have got a really solid backhand cross court, and you just hit that ball cross court, cross court, cross court. Occasionally you go down the line, but that tactically, it just releases your mind when you're not always thinking, okay, should I go down the line? Should I go cross court, cross court, cross court? And from a technical perspective, personally, I don't know to what extent you're going to agree with me, but I think your backhand is better than your forehand. I
Mhm.
find your forehand complicated.
Mhm.
It's we'll talk a little bit more about your forehand in a little bit, but your backhand is just a take back and a swing through,
Mhm.
and it's good that what for most people is the weaker side, I consider actually to be your stronger side.
Yeah.
You did mention in what you had in sort of the exchange that we had beforehand
Mhm.
that when I asked you what's your weakness, you said high backhands that I tend to hit short. Well,
Yeah.
anybody's going to struggle on that. It's not
Yeah.
just you. But again, there's some things that you can do in those kinds of situations to make sure, well, not to make sure, but to reduce the chances of you hitting the ball short. What do you think? What's your counter when somebody is pinning you on high balls on the backhand?
Mhm. I guess you could go loopy backhand back. So just like not a moon ball, but like one of those like high shape ones. The danger of that is if you're playing good play, they might come in for a dry volley. But I guess it's maybe not to do with the actual backhand itself, but could be with the footwork as well, like getting into a better contact point on it, or maybe taking it a bit earlier. I guess those are the few things I could think of then.
Yeah, definitely. You could try and cut off the angle, take it earlier, take it on the rise. And I definitely think your backhand has that ability. So
Mhm.
that's definitely one option.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, a very much underused shot in your game
Mhm.
is the backspin backhand, the
Yeah.
slice.
Mhm.
I don't know where you're at with that shot, but in your match there, you hit, I think I spotted just two slice backhands, and
Mhm.
those were just in emergencies. Those were not intentional. Those were sort of scramble the ball back over.
Mhm.
And it's such a fantastic shot to use if you know how to do it. How would you evaluate your backspin backhand?
Yeah, I'd say I probably use it more when I'm under pressure. I feel like my slice is actually good. I can hit a good slice when I intentionally do it. I guess I just don't spot the tactical times to use it within a match. I think it's more of a tactical thing rather than a technical thing. I have the ability to hit a good slice. I just don't use it because I'm not spotting good times to use it. Basically,
When would be a good time, do you think?
changing the pace, a bit of variation. That's one time. Maybe if someone struggles with low balls, you could go low slice to their backhand as well, bring them into the net maybe. Yeah, variation and low shots. What else do you think?
Well, listen, I wrote an article for a magazine some years back, which was about the slice backhand.
Mhm.
And if I remember correctly, I came with 32 situations where the slice backhand might be preferable to use, where the slice,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
shouldn't say just the slice backhand, because if the slice backhand is an effective shot, then the slice forehand is just as effective.
Hmm.
So 32 situations where the slice might be preferable over a flat or a topspin shot. We'll talk a little bit more about that because right now I want to build you up. I want to talk
Yeah,
about the good things
yeah.
before we talk some of the stuff that I think you can improve.
So
Um,
just before you move
uh,
on quickly, something that I thought was interesting. Dan Evans always hits the slice backhand, and he wins so many matches with it.
Absolutely. I mean, let's put it this way. It's not a hindrance. Typically you see coaches who will say, don't hit slice, don't hit slice. And you've got so many examples of players who spent their whole career just
Mm-hmm.
using backspin. And, I mean, the best example of a great slice
Mm-hmm.
that certainly did not hinder her career is who?
Um, what, female or male?
Hmm.
Female. Justin Hennon, I can think.
Nope.
No.
Nope. Justine Henin had one of the all-time greatest topspin backhands, but
Yeah.
not her slice. A little bit before your
Oh,
time.
Oh, I was going to say Ash Barty uses the slice quite a lot.
Oh God, great example. But yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't the one I was thinking of because Ash managed to mix it up. I'm
Yeah.
talking about a player who only used the slice backhand,
Oh, I can't think of who you're thinking. Who is it?
Steffi Graf.
Okay.
Look her up.
Yeah.
She's one of the all-time great players.
Hmm.
And in her whole career, she must have hit maybe 10, 10 drive backhands.
Right.
Everything else was a slice. And
Hmm.
Dan Evans, nowadays, we had Feliciano Lopez, who had a great slice backhand. So, like I said, a slice backhand is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign
Yeah.
of strength.
Hmm.
We'll go over that a little bit more later.
Okay.
Um, very, very high percentage of returns back in. Great
Yeah.
stuff.
Hmm.
Gosh, I mean, I can maybe count on one hand the number of times you fluff the return. Oh,
Hmm.
that's such a huge advantage. And the fact that you're moving in on it, it shows that you really believe in that.
Yeah.
So really, really good. And the other thing that was fantastic, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to send me the full video so I could see what was going on between the points, is you're extremely focused. My God, you were in the middle between two other chords. And if that was me watching, I'd be like, whilst I'm picking up balls, I'd be watching what's going on in the points. You had tunnel vision. I don't think I saw you once look left or right.
Yeah.
Extremely focused, really, really good. And I don't know what's going through your mind in that time. I don't know
Mhm.
whether you're thinking about the point that's coming up or
Yeah.
what's going through your mind actually. What's
I quite like to follow a process of accept, analyze, and reset. So accepting what happens in the previous point, resetting, so doing breathing or focusing on sensation, like the feeling of the ball or the racket, and analyzing. Sometimes when you miss a shot, but sometimes I skip the analyzing phase because you don't need to over-analyze whilst you're playing. But the key thing is just keeping your eyes focused on the ball. That's what I try to do.
Mm.
Watch the ball where you're going to pick it up, then pick it up, and then walk back to the line and look where you're going to serve. And then when your opponent's picking up the ball, just watch them pick up the ball and then walk to the line. So if I keep my eyes focused on a single point, then I tend to keep my concentration.
Yeah, it certainly you were going through that process extremely well because, like I said, you were not distracted with stuff outside of your court. Analyze what I would say. I don't think, like you said yourself, I don't think there's anything wrong with analyzing, but don't microanalyze. Analyze trends.
Mm-hmm.
If you're noticing that you're hitting a lot of first serves into the net on that particular day, okay, now you've raised your awareness and you've noticed a trend. So your target should be if the first serve goes in the net on one point, on the next first serve on the next point, where's it going to go? It's either going to go in or it's going to go too long.
Yeah.
Never makes the same mistake twice in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And so raising your awareness and analyzing it from that perspective is very, very helpful. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, definitely not dwelling too much on the previous point, which already happened, is very, very good. Okay, some of the stuff that I think you might consider improving on. Can you go to 13 minutes?
Yep.
Ah, no. Tactical error there on such a big point as well. 30-all definitely should not be coming in on that serve, especially after noticing how ineffective it was.
What was the comment you said? Should not be coming in on that serve,
Yeah.
especially after noticing how ineffective it was.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit more what you meant about that?
So I planned to come in before the point started, so that was a plan. And then I hit the serve out wide, but then it was right in the slot for him to rip a forehand. So ideally, I'd be coming in off that serve. It was a bit more effective, and I pulled him outside the tram lines a little bit more. So I felt like in that moment I should have recognised that the serve was weak and then changed my plan just to stay back.
Do you not think that it's too late, that once you've made the decision and given that serve and volley is serve and volley rather than serve, watch, observe, decide, evaluate, and then come in,
Yeah.
do you not think that once you've made that decision, it's too late to say, especially after noticing how ineffective it was? You've
Yeah.
committed, for better or for worse, you got to go in. Or do you tend to serve and watch and then decide to come in? What's your process on that?
So I think you're right. I think
it's probably too late because by the time the ball bounces, you're probably like 3 or 4 steps towards the service line anyway. I'd say most of the time when I do serve and volley, I don't plan it before the point. I'd hit a serve, recognize that it's effective, and then come into the net. So a bit like what we were talking about earlier, sort of like the sneak volley when they're behind the base, I open up the racket face and then I move in. That's often the times where I serve and volley. So this time I chose to do it, and so I guess I felt like that was the wrong decision. But I do think you're right in the fact that once I made that decision, that's all I was going to do. I couldn't have changed my mind.
Here's the thing. We should reverse that thought process. That thought process should not going to the net on the serve is not something that you should be deciding after seeing the quality of the serve or the quality of the return, because too often it'll mean that you're going to be playing your first volley in the defensive volleying position, somewhere around the service line. You know, I really think that if you do like to serve and volley, then serve and volley consciously rather than based on the opponent's reaction. And it would be a real pity, I think, given how effective you are at the net, if you weren't going to serve and volley on a more regular basis. It's something that you obviously feel very comfortable and that you're adept at. I don't know if you've seen the statistic of the top players. I don't have the statistic right here to mind, but Chris O'Shaughnessy kept some records of the players, and I think it was Nadal, who you really don't associate typically as a serve and volleyer or as a net rusher, but he's winning on average 52% of his baseline rallies, which is typical for a top player. And he's winning over 70% of when he's coming into the net.
I think he does it quite a lot on like big points as well. He doesn't do it on like the less important points. He does it on like break points. Like, interesting, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm not saying that you should turn into a serve and volleyer or a net rusher, but certainly as far as you're serving and volleying, integrate it as a sort of a consequential plan rather sort of a random plan. Having said that, can you go to 29 minutes and 6 seconds?
Yeah.
Okay, you fluff the volley. Fine, it happens. You know, but here's the thing. Every time you served and volleyed in that match on the deuce side, you served and volleyed cross court. You served to his forehand out wide. Was there a specific thought process behind that, or was it sort of what you were saying earlier on? Let's serve, let's see how he returns, and then we go in.
Probably a mixture. So for some reason, I feel more comfortable serve volleying out wide on the deuce side, just because when I do that, I feel like there's more space to go with the volley. And in this match, I think he sliced quite a lot of returns. So I don't think I was really thinking too much about where I was serving and volleying. I was just kind of like in the moment, serve, right, I'm coming in. So there wasn't too much thought process behind it, to be honest.
Okay. Here's my thought on this. Serving and volleying cross court has the advantage that if it's a good serve, it brings him out wide. He's completely in trouble. He's scooping the ball. It's going to be a weak return. You've got a massively open court in which to put the ball in. What are the disadvantages of serving and volleying on the deuce side cross out wide?
They have a lot of options with their forehand. So they could go for a little angle or a big shot down the line. Just it's their stronger shot.
Good. First of all, hang on. You've done two things in one go. First of all, you're hitting to most people's strength. So if it's a bad serve, you're going to get it. You're going to be in trouble. So that's the first thing. Secondly, you are creating angles potentially. Okay. What else? What else is a disadvantage of hitting a cross or approaching on the baseline of a cross-court ball?
Tougher to cover with your feet because you've got more distance to go.
There you go. Yeah, you've got a much further distance to cover because you've got to follow your ball. So you've got to go to the cross-court side of the court than if you were to approach down the line or serve down the middle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just something to think about.
I agree with that. That actually slipped my mind, the distance to cover for the recovery. So that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. Having said that, I think serving and volleying on the ad side out wide is not a bad tactic because you're going for the opponent's weaker side. I think
Especially off the kick serve as well.
absolutely. If you've got a
Yeah.
great kick serve, if you can really pull him out wide,
Mhm.
then definitely. And another strategic thing, you'll notice Casper Ruud very, very often serving from nearly out by the tram lines on
Mhm.
the ad side. Why?
Mhm. More angle.
What's number two?
When they return from that angle, they can't go straight line. So even if they go line, you don't have to cover as much distance.
Good. Number three.
Oh, then he's more likely to get a forehand on the next ball.
Absolutely. You've got a good IQ. You've got a good, absolutely. Yeah. The other one, and especially at sort of your level and weaker,
Mhm.
is you're leaving that down the line open as an invitation to the opponent and saying to him, hey, listen, come on, give it a try. Go for your
Yeah.
down the line. You're
Yeah.
hoping that they are going to try it and that you get a freebie, an error, because that's a tough return for them to make.
Yeah.
Okay, I definitely wouldn't serve and volley because you're so far out of the court
Yeah.
from doing that. But nevertheless, a
So
good tactic for you to
would you
put
say
in.
that's for first serve and second serve if you're going wide?
Yeah,
Or yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would go for even if you've got a good kick serve,
Mhm.
absolutely, even for the second serve.
Okay.
If you notice after a couple of times that he's got the ability to hit a decent down the line and it ain't working, okay, it's not working, you don't do it.
Yeah.
First serve, definitely, I would stick to it.
Yeah.
But having said that, we'll go on to your first serve in a minute. Can we go to 7 minutes, 36 seconds? So nothing in particular about those 2 points.
Mhm.
You lost one of them. I can't remember what happened at 40-15. I think you probably won it because you won those first three games.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: is more what you didn't do and what I think you should be doing.
Okay.
40 love and 40-15 from now on, every time you are going to do what?
I don't know.
Serve and volley.
Okay.
Serve and volley every time.
Mhm.
At 40 love and 40-15, make a deal with yourself that you will serve and volley. Why?
Um, you got point advantage. It's less risky.
Good.
Um,
Who's under
it's
pressure right now? You or the opponent?
he is.
So the opponent tends to, I mean, I don't know about you, but when you're 40 love down, what are you doing? You're going to try and make sure that you get your return into the court. So you're going to be a little bit safer, a little bit slower with your return just to make sure you get it in, which is a
Mhm.
much easier volley.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think I often see serve and volley as kind of like a drop shot, like a surprise tactic, rather than like a pattern to use on a finishing point or a big point. You know what I mean?
As I said, Cam, you will struggle to reach the next level
Mhm.
if you base your game around winning from the baseline.
Right.
And why do I say that? It's because right now, it's difficult for you to put the ball away from the
Yeah.
baseline. You don't have the power. You don't have a winner. The forehand tends to be, in that match at least, tends to be a little bit of a topspin. I seldom see you hitting flat balls and
Mhm.
going, or the ability to hit an outright winner. So
Mhm.
you're gonna have to start relying a little bit more on getting freebies. And
Mhm.
freebies is coming into the net a little bit more often.
I completely agree. Like
Yeah.
I don't have. I've never felt like I've had that firepower weapon from the back of the court to finish the points, and then yeah,
And that's okay. That's
yeah,
okay. I mean, you've got a lot of players who built up a career without the ability or having great winners. It's not the be all or end all.
yeah.
But therefore, yeah, just coming into the net a little bit more consequently, a little bit more consciously, I
Mhm.
think will certainly help you. Serve on the due side, too predictable.
Okay.
I felt that, and I think you mentioned it also, you tend to prefer hitting a cross out wide, right,
Yeah.
on the deuce court.
Mhm.
Make it your goal to really develop a really good kick serve down the middle and first serve down the middle. As the match goes along, you seem to be standing further and further back.
Yeah.
Yeah, he kind of got more confident. He was hitting a little bit harder, so you were reacting to that to a certain extent. But I think once you develop that sort of mindset of, I want to be coming in, I want to be aggressive, I want the opportunity to volley, you're going to be spending a little bit more time, which puts the opponent a little bit more under pressure. And so what happened is you started standing further and further back, which puts you more and more on the defensive, which makes it more and more difficult for you to hit an aggressive shot, which makes it more difficult for you to come in. You sort of see how it all snowballs. What was your plan B? I mean, what as sort of the match started slipping away,
Mhm.
what was going through your mind? How were you going to counter it?
I probably didn't really have a plan B for this one. Like, my plan was to try and get on the front foot early, try and dictate these points. And then when I lost the first set, what went through my head was like, I don't know how I lost that first set. I felt like I was the better player for the whole match so far. Yeah, I'd say I didn't really have a plan B, and I feel like I could have had more variation.
And I think that's interesting that you say so. A little bit more variety, a little bit more things for him to make him think, oh, what the heck's going on? Why is Cam doing this and why is Cam doing that? Oh, that's kind of
Yeah.
unpleasant. How many drop shots did you play in the match?
0, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a rhetorical question. Yes, 0. How many times did you play the ball consciously short to bring him into the net?
But yeah, none again.
How many times did you play a slice out wide, a short slice out wide to take him out of the court?
Yeah, same answer.
Yeah, it's just to say, you gotta as his confidence starts to build up, you gotta start making him think, and you gotta start making him miss some balls,
Yeah.
so as to make him start overthink.
Yeah.
And think, what the heck is Cam doing? Why is he doing this? And I hate that, and whatever else. Variety in your game, the ability to mix things up and start making the opponent think, and less focused on yourself and more focused on what you need to do to make the opponent play worse. Here's a little thing, a little detail, which I think is kind of cool one to consider.
Yeah.
Do the toss before the warm-up so that you know whether during the warm-up you need
Yeah.
to put extra focus on your serve or extra
Yeah.
focus on your return. The other thing is it immediately makes you take control of the match. It's a little psychological thing where you're immediately taking the initiative and you're showing the opponent who's boss. Hit the first ball down the middle. Why? Make sure that when you feed the ball, make sure it goes straight down the middle. Why?
To see if they naturally lean towards a forehand or a backhand.
Exactly. Definitely. You immediately already start to see what your game plan is going to be.
Right.
The other thing, look at when as you warm up with them, look at where they're lifting, on which shot they're lifting the feet. An indication. I don't know whether we can. I don't know if you can see this, but if whichever shot they're lifting off,
Yeah.
is a sign of what's the opposite of confidence? Lack of confidence in
Right.
that shot. So you hit them a neutral shot, a relatively easy shot, and see when they're planted on the ground, when they hit it, means they're rooted on that shot, means they feel good about it. If you see them lift, that's immediately an indication that that's a shot that they don't have confidence in. This is not about you. You might have the best of intentions, but the reality is, as much as you'd like to think that you're going to go out and play the best match of your life, the majority of the time it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It might happen once or twice a year, but the majority of, and that's actually that brings about a fun story. When I was based in Dubai many years ago, it was 2005. Federer came out to train at the facility where I was based. It was a summer. He had just, I think it was 2005 or 2006, I can't remember. It was the year, it was just a few weeks after he had absolutely destroyed, annihilated Roddick in the Wimbledon final.
Right.
And so I got to spend a lot of time with him. I was the director of tennis at the facility, so obviously I organized everything for him. And then I drove him back to his hotel every night. There wasn't all the razzmatazz yet around him. So I got to ask him a lot of questions. And one of the questions I asked him, I said, listen, you destroyed Roddick in that final. How often are you in the zone? You were plainly playing on another level. He says, yeah, that happens maybe twice, maybe once or twice a year. And even then, it doesn't happen through a whole match. What he said thereafter was very interesting. He said, it's not about winning when you're playing well. That'll take care of itself. It's about winning when you're not playing well. And the best players, I feel, that's what he said, are the ones who are able to solve the problem when things are not going well. He says, every time I go out on the court, something's not clicking in my game. My first serve isn't going in, my forehands are framing or whatever. Most of the time I'm able to find some way of getting through it.
Right.
So that's as much as you want to be self-focused, solving problems. But everything else should be based around what's going to give the opponent problems. How am I going to bring the opponent's level down?
Yeah,
And
that's interesting.
that's one of the bigger picture things I wanted to talk up to you about. You said that, I don't know whether it was in this video or another one of your videos, you said, keep trying to do the right thing. Yes and no.
Right.
Have a sort of a big picture of where you would like your game to go and practice that in your practice matches. But when you're in a match situation, in a real match where it really counts, you gotta do what's gonna bring the opponent down. It's one of the most annoying things I hear when I hear these interviews of pros, and they're also, how are you gonna beat your opponent tomorrow? And you know, the standard answer is, well, I've just got to play my game, and then you know, hopefully things will turn. No, it's not about playing your game, because you're going in there thinking that your game is going to work, when most of the time something is not going to work in your game. Hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And planning for the worst means bringing your opponent down and focusing on your opponent and focusing what you need to do to identify their weaknesses.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So then my question for you is, how do you, in a match situation, analyze that without taking yourself away from the present moment too much?
The warm-up will already give me a real, and that's why you know, the warm-up is such an important time of the match. By the time you start the first point, you already know who's going to serve and who's going to return, and you already have a sort of a basic strategy as to what might work and what might not work. If you're waiting for the first 3 or 4 games, or even the first set, to figure out what the opponent's weakness, is going to be too late. All right, listen, let's go through some of the big picture stuff. Develop a flat forehand winner, the ability to hit the ball up here and be able to put it away. Maybe you can, in that match, I didn't see much of it, yet didn't get a lot of freebies. The other thing is, develop a flat serve. It tends to be a sort of a first and a second serve tend to be relatively similar. It seems to be a spinny serve rather than a flat serve. We talked about it. The ability to unrhythm, I say, rather than rhythm, unrhythm your opponent. So your ability to use your slice backhand as a conscious part of your strategy. I didn't get a sense of what you were trying to do with your forehand. There's some forehands down the line, some forehands cross-court. I would simplify that mentally. Keep it cross-court, keep it cross-court, keep it cross-court until you've got a clear opportunity to go down the line. You either go for the winner or you approach to the net on that. I feel that it was a little bit of a complicated, I don't know. For me, it felt messy. The forehand felt messy in that match. I didn't really get a sense of what you were trying to achieve with that. Yeah, mishit returns. Just be aware whenever you feel that you're mishitting returns, be it the forehand or the backhand. Think that the court is over there and not up there. So
Yeah.
let's make sure that the racket is going towards the opponent
Yeah.
rather than upwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just something to think about. You're trying to get that ball to the opponent rather than up towards the sky. And so it
Yeah.
seemed to me that a lot of the returns were going up in that direction rather than through. That's it. That's all the things.
That's absolutely fantastic. That the amount of detail and the amount of time and effort you put into all this is incredible. I really, really appreciate it.
Is there anything else I can do to help? I'd love to hear of your progress. I'm sure I can do that through your videos, but yeah, always happy to help.
Thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate it.
Cam, have a great day, okay? Thanks again to you. All the best.
All right, so I've just watched that Zoom call back, and I honestly think this Zoom call was awesome. I love the way that Phil approached the call, clear, the way he asked me questions to figure out the point that he was getting to, and I think that's such an excellent way of coaching, really making the player think for themselves and try and get to the outcome that he's trying to teach me. He did that a lot throughout, and I love that. Gave examples, gave stories to back up his points, and prefaced it with, I might not agree with everything that he says, and that's fine, but to have an outside opinion is interesting. And to be fair, I can't think of one thing that I really strongly disagreed with. Everything that he said was really clear, I understood it all, and I could really see what he was getting out of my game. I thought that was excellent and fully deserves the 5 stars that I gave him. And again, the value for money, incredible. £30 to have a Zoom call with all of that information. Super impressive, really happy with the feedback he gave me. And at the end of the session, he sent me a little message saying, what was my key takeaway? What was the biggest thing? And I said it was the serve volley thing, because I think that's really interesting. I've had people say this to me before, and I think that'll help my serve going for a little bit more on those points, really commanding the play. And like he said, I need to finish points off at the net because I don't have that overpowering game style. But he also picked up on what the other coaches that I spoke to, what Manos said, what Iyed was saying about how you need to have variety as well. You can't just play that aggressive game style for the whole match and expect to win every single time. You've got to have that variety with it. What I also found absolutely shocking and showed why I'm doing this experiment really is that no one goes to Fiverr for tennis coaching. No one. I was the first client for all 3 of these coaches on Fiverr. And I'm so surprised by that. People are always looking for coaches, they're always on social media looking for tips, and no one has gone to Fiverr, to these coaches that I've picked out anyway. So if you watched this video, if you enjoyed it, if you thought the feedback was good, then why don't you just head out to Fiverr and check out these coaches, because they're really nice guys. All of them were really up for being part of the video. Good coaches, and yeah, I think that they deserve a lot more clients on Fiverr, because it was really interesting. But to answer my initial question, where does Fiverr tennis coaching rank between social media tips and real life tennis coaching? And I think it depends on where you are at with your tennis. If you're a beginner and your technique's all over the place, you don't really know where to improve, and you just want to get a rally going, I think you've got to go in real life tennis coaching. You don't have the terminology knowledge, you don't have the tennis IQ yet to pick up on what these coaches are saying over message. Zoom call, you can get a little bit more understanding of what they're on about, because then they can show you videos as well and talk through it with you. But still, that feeling of real life hitting the ball, someone giving you feedback straight away, is so important for that stage in your tennis. However, if you're more towards intermediate and towards advanced, I think this is an interesting route to go down. If you're struggling with a little area of your game, you're not sure about a little thing on your technique, you don't have many tennis friends around you that can help you out who are more experienced than you, spending £5 to send a video of a shot or a little bit of match play and getting some feedback like this is excellent. It's like £5 to get that. Value for money, incredible. Or even with Iyed, where it's more like 12 to 15, like, you get good feedback from these coaches for something that you're trying to get better at, you're not sure where to improve, little area of your game. I think it's a great way to go down, just to get that little thing clicked in your mind or clicked in your game. Now, if you're intermediate to advanced and you want long-term coaching, I'd probably go down the route of maybe having an option on the Fiverr that allows Zoom call and conversations, because you're still having to pay less than a real in-life tennis lesson, but you get that more feel like you're actually talking to someone, you can discuss things, you can show videos. I think if you're going to do that route with the Zoom call, I think you have a consistent lesson, maybe like one every couple of months or something, just to track your progress, talk through it with someone, especially if you don't have that much time in your day and it's tough to get to a real tennis lesson. So I just want to give a massive shout out to all 3 coaches that were up for being part of this video. They absolutely smashed it. They deserve the 5 stars that I gave them. They deserve a lot more clients. And yeah, I want to thank them a lot for being part of this video. It was really fun to make, and I will see you in the next one.